Let's get started. At least 131 people have been killed as Chile battles its deadliest wildfires in recent history. Efforts are currently underway by forensic teams which continue to try to identify the deceased. Only 35 of the victims have been identified so far, with hundreds still reported missing. The slow process has left many desperate for news of their missing family members. The wildfires have raged through more than 64,000 acres across the central and southern regions of the country. Several families have lost their homes to the fires. More than 14,000 homes have been damaged. The wildfires began several days ago and have severely impacted two coastal cities popular among tourists. That is Vina del Mar and Valparaiso. The cities account for more than 1 million residents. Scientists say the main reason for this devastating event is simple: hotter temperatures, and they say that climate change and the El Nino phenomenon are key to understand the disaster. According to experts, the wildfire spread so far and so quickly due to high winds. And while strong summer winds are common in central Chile, temperatures are way higher now than they were a few years ago.
Unfortunately, what happened last week, such high temperatures, intense winds, and voracious fires that destroyed a big part of Vina del Mar, is a typical phenomenon largely caused by human influence on the climate.
Apart from the heat wave, Chile has also been battling a devastating drought for at least 15 years. The drought helped fuel the fires by creating a mass of vegetation that dried out quickly. Climatologists point that a similar phenomenon is now happening across the Andes in Argentina. In fact, just last week, a national park in Argentina's Patagonia region caught fire and thousands of acres were burnt. In Brazil, too, wildfires surged in the Amazon in October. Amid a drought driven by climate change, and as climate change worsens, in fact, extreme weather conditions are only likely to gain severity, making deadly events like these wildfires more and more common.
Because of the impact of the weather, 7 homes that were actually impacted.
It certainly was very intense, and it certainly looks more intense.
Rescue efforts continue in California after a mega storm wreaked havoc across the American state. More than 400 mudslides have been reported in Los Angeles. The key city that is home to Hollywood is situated in south of California. This is one of the wettest storms in the region's history. The city has seen more than half the amount of its expected rainfall in a matter of just 48 hours. Officials have warned the threat has not passed just yet.
This has truly been a historic storm for Los Angeles. We're talking about the third wettest 2-day stretch since records started in the 1870s.
Officials expressing relief say that there have been no casualties reported in LA so far. Despite the storm's size and intensity, 3 people were, however, killed in Northern California over the weekend. Authorities say that while the rain is now decreasing, most of South California remains under flood watch. The Weather Service has also warned people to remain on high alert as fast-moving creeks and rivers increase the risk of drowning.
Angelenos should know that even though the rain may ease up a bit today, this storm continues, and that means we still need Angelenos to take precautions and to stay informed during this time.
In Santa Barbara country, residents of a seaside apartment were evacuated after a cliff that it was built on collapsed due to incessant rain. This is the second storm that California has seen in a week. Governor Gavin Newsom has issued a state of emergency for counties, including Los Angeles and Santa Barbara. These are the places where rains have brought traffic to a standstill. The storms that hit California this week qualify as a Pineapple Express. This is a type of atmospheric river originating from the subtropical waters around Hawaii. Meanwhile, erratic weather is taking its toll on Cuba as well. On Tuesday, the country's north coast was slammed by an unusual cold front. With the waves coming in, major streets were flooded with seawater and some power stations were rendered out of service, causing scattered outages.
This really is something new. The climate has changed and nature has changed due to human beings' aggression against nature. This is the answer to what we are experiencing today, not only in Cuba but in all countries.
Streets in the capital city, Havana, were also littered with trash and waste carried in by waves from the polluted seawater. On Tuesday, the western parts of the country witnessed 100 kilometers per hour strong winds, plunging the temperature to an unusually cold 12 degrees Celsius. Strong winds are also advancing from Florida that saw similar scenes earlier this week.
If you have a roof in bad condition like mine, you are worried and stressed because the roof might fall off or water may leak. This puts us under stress.
Havana is particularly vulnerable to rising sea levels and strong storms triggered by climate change, the reason being the coastal city's location on the Gulf of Mexico. As per the UNDP, more than one-third of its residents live in areas at risk from encroaching waters. A further rise in sea levels poses danger not just to the people but to the existence of this city itself. A new study has found that water scarcity could affect 3 billion more people than previously expected by the mid-century, with an increased pollution level rendering river sources unsafe for humans and wildlife alike. According to the UN's climate science panel, around half of the world's population currently faces severe water scarcity for at least a month a year. It warned that global warming impacts and rising demand are the key risks to global supply issues. But now a new research by scientists in Germany and the Netherlands has found that if harmful nitrogen pollution is factored in, the number of areas considered water scarce increases dramatically. The new study, published in the journal Nature Communications, analyzed river basins around the world which are key sources of drinking water and hubs for urban and economic activity. According to data analyzed, the number of sub-basins, the smaller units in river basins facing severe water scarcity, was twice as much as previously thought in 2010 and could then subsequently get worse in the coming decades. A study estimates that in 2010, more than 2,500 sub-basins in the world are now facing water scarcity, when nitrogen pollution's impact on water quality was taken into account as compared to just 984. According to conventional assessments based on quantity, that figure could rise up to over 3,000 by 2050. Estimates suggest that this would affect roughly 6.8 to 7.8 billion people, or roughly 3 billion more than in conventional estimates. Human activities are spewing large amounts of nitrogen, pathogens, chemicals and plastics into the water systems. Nitrogen from agricultural fertilizers in particular contributes to algae growth that can then choke waterways, threaten marine life and compromise water quality. According to the authors of the study, even in the most optimistic estimates, nitrogen pollution would then stay at substantial levels in important agricultural areas, be it Europe, China and even India. Let's move on now. The European Union aims to slash 90% of its greenhouse gas emissions by 2040 as part of its push to become the world's first climate-neutral continent. The new interim targets towards making the bloc carbon neutral in 2050 aims to ensure that climate neutrality becomes a neutrality by the mid-century. Now, under the proposal laid out by the European Commission's executive body, the bloc will have to pump 90% less planet-heating gas into the air by 2040 than it did in 1990. EU Climate Commissioner stated that the target has sent a message to the world that the European continent continues to lead the way on climate action.
Based on the best available science and a detailed impact assessment, as I'm sure you have seen, we are recommending that the 2040 target should be a 90% cut in emissions.
The 27-nation European Union is already working towards an interim target of cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030. While the 2040 target is part of a bid to stop extreme weather from growing more violent, there is fear of rising discontent on account of rising protests from farmers.
Agriculture, industry and all citizens need to be in a position to achieve more ambitious objectives. That's why we need the Net Zero Industry Act, which is being negotiated right now. That's why we need a positive approach to agriculture. We should not be pushing agriculture into the corner and forcing them. We have to remember that agriculture is the only sector that actually removes CO2 from the atmosphere, and we need to stay on that path.
The announcements came as dozens of farmers protested outside the European Parliament building, venting their anger over shrinking incomes, rising costs and what they say are increasingly difficult green regulations, forcing politicians in the EU and its member states to row back on plans to make farms pollute less and scrap more of the individual targets. As millions of Chinese travel home for the Spring Festival holidays, heavy snow and ice has disrupted their journey in several parts of the country. Highways have been shut down, hundreds of trains and flights have been suspended. Extreme weather conditions have taken a toll on New Year's celebrations. We end this edition of WION's Climate Tracker with these visuals. Take a look.